All right. So, Reem, I am so thrilled we're finally meeting. I've admired your work for a long time, and not just for the incredible flavors that you bring to the table, really just for how you use food as a language of belonging, resistance, and storytelling. And so, for those who don't already know you, Reem Assil is a Palestinian Syrian-American chef, activist, and author, and the founder of Reem's California, a beloved bakery and restaurant inspired by Arab street corner bakeries and rooted in the tradition of warm, generous hospitality. Her work has been recognized by the James Beard Foundation and countless food lovers across the country, not only for her bold flavors, but for the way she uses food as a tool for connection, resistance, and cultural storytelling. Her cookbook, Arabiyya, Recipes from the Life of an Arab in Diaspora, is part memoir, part love letter to her heritage. So, here on Nom Nom, we explore the ways food carries our histories and connects us across cultures. And your journey from community organizer to chef, from Arab street corner bakeries to building Reem's California embodies that so beautifully, Reem. So I'm excited for us to dive into what Arab hospitality means to you, how food has been both a bridge and a political act in your life, and the ways it continues to shape community. So thank you for joining me for this conversation and for bringing your voice, your heart, and your recipes to so many people who need that taste of home.
Nom, 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 nom.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. That was a great rendition of my work.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so incredible. Again, watching what I get to see publicly, I know it's not always real life, but it's really cool to observe. Okay, so let's start with where are you joining from today?
I am joining from my kitchen in Oakland, California.
Awesome. So you're at home. Or do you generally work from home during the days, or are you usually in the bakery?
It really depends. Mondays are kind of like the day to recoup from the long week. I'm also a mom, so that requires me to be Oakland side a lot more. Oakland has been my home for over 20 years now.
Okay.
And
Wow.
yeah, and I kind of go back and forth between Oakland and San Francisco when the restaurant really needs me, but Reams kind of runs itself, which is
Awesome.
lovely.
I love that. Good for you. Okay, here's a question. Have you eaten yet today? And if so, what was your first bite this morning?
Ironically, I was stuffing my face with kettle chips before I entered this conversation. Not necessarily to be proud of, but
But it's reality.
here lime, the life of an entrepreneur in between different
Right.
things. But what was my first bite this morning? I had um, maple pecan clusters and milk. I was eating
Mm.
cereal with my child to make sure he drinks his milk and eats his cereal. So,
You can't stop when you're a mama. You're
no,
always on. What is your go-to snack when you're running around?
probably chips.
Yeah, I'm a salty person too, so
Yeah, I just can't. I mean, I can't get enough of them. I always have to have my cupboard with something crunchy and salty. When I'm in the bakery, that's our pita chips. I can't like I always
mm,
go walk by if I want something.
love
Um,
that.
yeah, but something usually carbohydrate.
Yeah. Well, I'm very much like salty and crunchy person too, so I completely get that. What is something that has brought you joy, I guess, this week or in this past week or recently, in or out of the kitchen?
Something that has brought me joy. I mean, to be transparent, it's definitely been a hard season, let alone last 2 years.
Yeah.
Um, but I find joy in the little spaces of time that I'm afforded to be able to count my blessings. Enjoy the sun for even for just 5 minutes or laugh at a joke that my child has shared. Yeah, I think children and young people in general, I think we're all kind of really immersed with all of the things coming our way through social
Mm.
media, and that's really hard. But whenever I see my kin, my Arab
Mm.
diaspora and back in the homeland surviving the most, unimaginable things, but they're like happy about the plant they planted or the cat they fed. I don't know,
Oh,
that just those things bring me joy.
yeah, the
Yeah,
simple
so
things.
yeah, it's just the little things.
Thank you for sharing that. I hear you. How about any recent food discovery or flavors that are exciting you right now?
I mean, I'm really into, I think I've grown to really love like fermentation techniques,
Mm,
sours, umami flavors, different pickling. So whenever I feel like every culture has a version of that, and so I'm always ordering that pickled thing off of a menu. Yeah, just different umamis from different cultures, whether it be the mushroom powder or the saffron. I've been cooking a lot of
mm.
Persian food, ironically. I just
Oh,
did.
funny.
I was like, I don't need to touch saffron again for a while because they're
Well,
so
and it's not
expensive.
cheap.
And it's not cheap, but yeah, we did like a cookbook dinner and getting to learn about those flavor profiles. And then I did a dinner with Iranian chefs out in Austin, which was
Oh,
really great. So
cool.
yeah, it's just like, wow, we're in the same region, but our flavor profiles are actually so different.
Mm,
Yeah, it gives me an appreciation for, but a lot of these like preservation fermentation creates these really kind of amazing umami flavors.
um, oh, I'm on the East Coast, and so I'm like, great, I can't wait to have dinner after this.
Yeah,
I'm getting hungry. Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about how food and belonging show up in unexpected places, at the airport, a Costco run, wherever. So I'm curious if that's something that you notice as well.
absolutely. I mean, I think it's uh, for me personally, I feel like I'm a conduit to create that, whether consciously or unconsciously, for everybody around me. And it's like such an amazing feeling when, for instance, we've been doing these Sunday supper series at Reams
Mm,
where we bring different, our friends and partners in the industry who represent different cultures. And
mm,
we create this really beautiful, cohesive menu that is not forced, Dominican flavors with Arab flavors, we did like one from the Black South with Reams and all these things.
mm.
And then we're experimenting, we're doing the things, and then one of my workers will walk in and smell that thing. They're like, "Oh, that reminds me of home."
Oh, I love that.
So I do think there's these universal sensory things that whether it be meat, stewing or grilled or rice cooking or the like yeasty smell of bread that just
Mm,
conjures up this kind of sense of home for people. And home is not a universal sense of belonging for a lot of us, but
right.
it is a sense of comfort, and I think that that is really amazing when we can do that. And it happens more often than I would think, and so when we're experimenting with these menu, that conjures up a memory for our chef partner.
I
And
love
it's
that.
just so easy to create these menus. I think place matters too, the context in which like food uh, happens. And so to me, I live in a very, very ethnically diverse, like per square foot, per square mile. So on any block here in Oakland, California, you can
Right.
have a Latin, it's somebody from Central America, a black neighbor that has lived there for generations that migrated from the South. You have a Chinese family next to, a
I love
Yemeni.
that.
It's like
I miss
so
that so much.
you get a mix of all these cultures and especially with the immigrant communities, a lot of it is rooted in our hospitality because that's kind of the way that we've survived. And so you walk into these stores,
Yeah.
uh, you walk into the grocery store and it's just like family, and it's kind of what attracted me to this industry in the first place when I went to the Arab world and I saw that the baker just knew every detail, every chisme, every gossip point of the family. I'm like, I want to be that baker, I want to have that. So it comes in the context of that warmth that, you know,
Mm.
feels in food spaces. But yeah, it's also in the just interactions with someone in those places too sometimes.
Ugh, I love that so much and it resonates, especially the hospitality part. It's like you can't go into a home and not just be fed and fed and fed and nurtured in some
Yeah,
way.
I'm sure it just happens on the street. It happens in the
Mm.
corner stores, you I would say, I mean, the statistic I heard was like there are 800 Arab-owned corner stores in San
Wow.
Francisco. That's a huge saturation of all of our
Yes.
groceries, our bodegas, if you will.
Yes.
And
Yes.
those are homes. Those are like where
Right.
kids,
Right.
and they're third spaces that people go to. So there's
You're
like
right on.
opportunity to create a place of like feeding and warmth.
I don't live in a place like that anymore. I moved from California, Southern California, about 5.5 years ago, and I live in like the exact opposite space now. And so, outside of Boston.
I grew up in Sudbury,
Oh,
Massachusetts.
no way.
Yeah, and
Oh, that's so interesting.
yeah, grew up in a little suburb
Yeah.
many years of my life, and then ventured to college in Cambridge, in Somerville, Massachusetts at
Okay.
Tufts. So
Okay.
I was an East Coaster, but I was always felt like a West Coaster trapped in an East Coaster's body. Like
That's funny.
one side of the family migrated west because the climate, I do think climate makes a difference in people's
Mhm.
ways of interacting. And
Absolutely.
yeah, all of that side of the family moved to Southern California. And so that was kind of our home away from home every summer. But yeah,
Oh,
I
I did the opposite. So you say that, and I'm like, oh, it matters where you live, and who you surround yourself with, and feeling that belonging in some way. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
it does. And I would say it's a certain superpower, like having grown up in a context where I was the only one to use food and culture as a sort of diplomacy tool, if you will, a gateway. I think it prepared me for years later. I had no
Mhm.
idea that I was going to get into food, but they don't teach you about the Swana community in your curriculum. And if they do, it's like these outdated videos of like Saudis and people in the Gulf, and
Yeah.
it's not
Tropes.
yeah, tropes basically. It's and so I do remember from a young age my mom using the tool of food, and so it just became a language that we learned.
Mm.
If we don't feel that sense of belonging, at least we try
Right.
to make other people feel a sense of belonging.
Mm. I've never heard someone put it that way, and that's so right on.
Well, it's an
Yeah.
exchange, right? In our cultures, you give what you receive, kind of that
Yeah.
the act of hospitality is really a dance, if you will,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
in culture specifically,
Yeah.
it's on the person being um, welcomed to give as much energy. If they don't give that, it's not going to work, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. So, Reem, you've described Arab hospitality as a warm embrace. What is your earliest memory of that feeling?
ironically, I don't have warm feelings uh, as a younger person, and I think that is because I took a lot of things for granted. Um, my grandmother was the matriarch of the family. She barely let anyone into her kitchen. However, she took on hospitality as a duty and a virtue. So I watched that. I watched her take that on, and she created a warm environment for us, but she herself didn't have that warm embrace. And that was
Mm.
a really interesting thing that I think as an adult learned to, because I feel like I carry so much of my grandmother's legacy and everything that I do. The warm embrace that, I started to feel was much more as an adult. Um, I would say very specifically, it was really in, I would say maybe in 2002, like when I started to really have these core memories of wanting a sense of belonging, going back to to Lebanon, to Syria, to these places where people just take you in as their own, even if you're a child from America, even if they make fun of your Arabic, all of the, that sort of like, taking you in. I definitely felt that. I felt that through the offering of food because I was a guest. But for my earliest memories, it's like really my grandmother making sure everybody was happy. It was my mother making sure everybody was happy. It was like we weren't part of that, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah,
Yes.
like she taught us the virtue of hospitality and kind of through that, seeing how she made people feel at ease.
Mm, I love that. So before becoming a chef, you were a community organizer. How did that work? So how did that work shape the way you cook and run a food business now?
Oh, in so many ways. I mean, first off, I never wanted, I, I'm an accidental restaurateur.
Mm.
Well, Reams was like just a project in my head. And then it became so much bigger because I think my community organizing background told me that you need to create institutions, you need to leave legacy. And you
Mm.
can't really sustain that as a one person show. One of the core fundamentals of organizing is that you develop leaders, right? So that they can carry on the work and then they develop leaders and that work gets, continued generationally. And I think being in the industry now for, 15 years professionally, 10 years as a business, I really see that. I see, um, had we not kind of approached it that way, Reams, I think would have been long gone 5 years ago, because we've definitely had our strife, um, economically, all of those things. But I think also Reams is so much more than a restaurant. It's a vision.
Mm.
What we're asking people to do when they work with us is beyond their paycheck. Even though they are collecting a paycheck, the type of person, the what we look for in terms of people's drive is like they want to invest in themselves.
Mm. Wow.
So we wanted it to be a transformative space, and that's not an easy feat because some people do want to just check in and check out.
Right.
Clock in, clock out, if you will. I myself being one of those at some point when I was burnt out from my nonprofit career. But we try to create a vision so irresistible that you can't get it anywhere else. And I think, yeah, our employees have been with us for, some of them have been with us from the very beginning, have grown with us, now run the spaces. So yeah, that's been a core tenet. And then I think the community building aspect of, I wanted Reams. Everything I do is to build community.
Yeah.
Someone who's felt that's like my deepest fear is to not have connection, uh,
Mm.
is to create kind of the space to grow my community. And a core fundamental of organizing is also that you build far and wide, you build bridges of understanding, you know, you build it diversely. And so I think that has been helpful for my business because when we've struggled, we can like lean in on different outside folks because we built that trust in that community. And then I was a labor organizer, so could you imagine going from organizing against the boss? Yeah. Boss, I had to find a way to handle that contradiction.
Power dynamics, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they are there and I have them and I own them where I can, but
That's what you can do.
yeah, I try to be as compassionate and yeah, like really, it's a worker-centered space and all the decisions we make are in partnership with the people who run Reams.
That sounds like a very special place. Sounds super powerful. Well, growing up Palestinian and Syrian American, what were the dishes that carried your family stories?
I mean, I think on my mom's side, my mom obviously was, as a lot of kitchens, had the onus of cooking. But she was a working mom
Mhm.
and she didn't have time to pass down. So the recipes didn't really get passed down to us like that. But I think and she was, I think, just contrary to the trope of like women passing down, she's a very educated woman, had her master's and then came to this country and couldn't use any of that.
Right.
Didn't, and so had to start from the beginning. And all of a sudden, she was expected to cook. Like, that's not something that was on her docket. So I think she learned to cook just like anyone else,
No.
her adult life. And I would say her one pot meals, my grandmother's stews, like the flavor development, the, the smells and tastes of home.
Mm.
I would say like more specifically, the two dishes that I associate or think about with her is the maftul, which is like a bigger couscous. It's usually made with bulgur and wheat. It came from obviously North Africa. Gaza and North Africa are very close. That's where my mom is from.
Mm.
Um, she would make it with like stewed chicken and carrots and onions and this like delicious broth, very brothy things. And then the frike, which is another grain that's like a cracked wheat. It's like smoky. And yeah, my mom was all about kind of those one pot meals. How can I pack all the flavor into one pot? So I feel like she brought that down. And the more traditional things like musakhan, which is a Palestinian chicken dish that is very, it's like our national dish for Palestinians. She would wrap them in tortillas and make them like sandwiches. She'd really adapt them to our cult, what our context was. And so I still feel like that. And it's become, we have a manouche flatbread at the restaurant that is called the Pali Cali, which I continue to do. So I feel like those, when I think about my mom in particular, my grandmother, you'd think she was running a restaurant in her, but she had just elaborate things for all the different food groups, whether it be savory pastries, to baklava, to grilled meats, and you know, she'd love her. The one that I remember now, the memory is conjuring up to me. I love doing these things because I don't really think about them
Yeah.
intentionally.
I love that.
Is two dishes, stuffed pigeon,
Mm.
hamami. Yeah, it's a very like I think she'd use Cornish hen, but it's like a very traditional thing. We stuff the small birds with like rice and meat, and she would make this hershwin. It's like her famous thing when we were all going to visit her in California, and then wrapped grape leaves that stacked very tightly, but with lamb tongue.
Interesting. I
Yeah,
haven't seen that.
really, like she made this like delicious and it would like just seep into everything. Yeah. I thought it
Was
was
that
brilliant.
her menu
That
or
was,
like
like,
her
her-
recipe?
yeah, it was like her specialty. I mean, we eat lamb tongue, but yeah, it
Yeah.
was a delicacy that
Right.
like around this time. It was either beef tongue or lamb tongue. I'm trying to remember, but it was, yeah, it was like in the form of this big pot of grape leaves that you would flip over.
Oh, wow. I
Yeah.
love learning these things. Thank you for sharing that. So we touched upon this a little bit, but at Enroot, we talk about food as a bridge across difference. What
Mhm.
do you think food can do that words sometimes just can't?
I mean, I guess I'm trying to put words to something that words can't, so that might be hard. But
Yeah, I
I
get it.
like to say that food on a very sensory level breaks down barriers, if that makes sense. So like all these
Absolutely.
like things that you have in your head, they start to relax. You're not in fight and flight mode, and that helps. It's not the only thing. I don't think food just builds bridges at a table. Those bridges need to be intentionally built, but it creates fertile ground to have uncomfortable conversations sometimes, to evoke something in someone, to think about something differently, so that they continue that work when they walk away from that table. But I think there's something very sensory about laying down arms for a
I
second. Yeah.
I agree. I
Or
agree.
whatever protective mechanisms we have. And I think food is so people talk about food as a medium of healing, but food is also a very weaponized,
Mhm.
and for a lot of us, I think for me, and I talk very openly about this in my cookbook and just in when I do interviews, like as someone who really experienced deep self-hate and depression, and that manifested in eating
Mm,
disorder and all of these things that, the deprivation of food, whether intentional or not, is a real thing for people. And so
yeah.
yeah, it's not just this like simple thing that food is great and yada yada yada. Food is
Yeah.
very, very political and needs to
Mm,
be treated with intentionality and care.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I tend to stay away from that euphemism, even though I'm a community builder. So much of what I do of Reams is beyond, like if it just laid at the Menaish, I would feel like
Mm,
it was sucking, right? Like a flatbread alone can't change the world. And I don't want anyone to believe that either.
we're
Um,
seeing that right now in the world. So it's, I mean,
yeah, I mean, all this humanization of all of this to humanize people, right? You would think food is kind of the way. And yet, when it came down to act, a whole people is being starved and we're not doing enough about it because we're too comfortable.
anything.
Yeah. So, food alone is not enough.
Yeah.
It's like just a very hard reality. But I do think it's a frontier for organizing, very, very practically speaking, because everybody has to eat.
Yeah.
Also, because economically, the way that our systems work, food intersects with so many different sectors of
Right.
society. Yet, separate the issue of food from the issue of immigration. You can't separate food from the issue of environmental
Mm,
justice. Yes.
resources. Yeah.
So food kind of intersects with all these other issues that people are working on. So why not,
Mm,
cultivate the revolution within food space?
yeah.
I really do think that that is a missed opportunity. So much of labor that goes into making food is how we survive as a society.
Right. No, I appreciate the frankness and just the thank you for the redirect on that. A needed reminder. Absolutely. And kind of to the point you just made, you've said that food can be a form of resistance. Can you share a time or, a time when a dish or a meal felt like an act of defiance?
I mean, I think there are many examples. The one that always comes to my mind when I think about like acts of resistance is whenever I put seafood on my menu. I think there are many examples of food in the diaspora that we can make that the place of origin cannot make,
Mm,
right? So in the case of my lineage, my grandmother comes from Jaffa, which was a coastal town, got pushed to Gaza, which is a seaport, one of the most prominent seaports of that whole area. and seafood and fish and access to waters that they no longer have access to or they'll get killed. They can't make those dishes anymore. So the I think their simple acts of making those dishes over there is a defiance. It's like you cannot take this away from us. We're willing to risk our lives to stay connected to our land and our waters and so on and so forth. So whenever I cook dishes like that, I feel like I'm carrying that story forward to remind people that because history can get erased very easily. I mean, you see people actively trying to do that and trying to do it through food appropriation. You know, those foods were not that. We created that. We cooked like the natives, and now like maybe generation after generation, you'll forget, and then
Right.
we have to worry about this, and we'll have gotten away with genocide, for instance. And you saw this with the Armenian genocide and many genocides. This is not a unique phenomenon, but food is always a kind of a cover up when people take foods and don't give stories.
Mm,
So simply the act of like being able to cook food that my ancestors or my people can't cook in the place of origin, but then also giving story, giving name, giving context is an act
mm.
of defiance to remind people that you cannot erase us, right? You make
That's so powerful.
Yeah, so I use food as kind of an uncovering when there's a, an attempt to cover.
Which, yeah, like to your point, you historically have seen it every time there's colonialization of a.
American food here is like that's indigenous foods, that's slave food from Africa that was brought over from people you enslaved, that's that whitewashing is a very intentional thing, even if you think
Mm,
it's just a natural phenomenon. But there are
right.
people who are defying that and they're doing it through their foodways.
Have there been moments when sharing a meal shifted, that you know of, shifted someone's perspective about your culture or history?
I'd like to hope so.
Which is why I said that you know of.
I know of. I remember sitting down with David Chang in his Ugly Delicious series and being like, "Did you talk to any Muslims during the Muslim ban?" Like he was kind of, but I like to think I like left a mark.
Mm,
We had that conversation. Yeah, I mean, I do think nothing is instantaneous. Everything is an iterative process. I remember, I mean, this is not related to food, but somewhat related to kind of changes that you make. You just never know what your interactions are with people. Like I remember when I was an organizer back in the day, I organized workers in the airports, and then many years later, I was on another organizing campaign, and I was talking to kids in middle school around development in their neighborhoods. And the teacher's aide, I drove her home that day, and I was telling her about kind of my past life. And it turns out her dad was an airport worker. And
wow.
she's like, "Oh my God, you don't even know what happened with my dad since that campaign. And like he was a new person and like more pleasant to be around and all these things." And so it's like
Yeah.
you just never know what conversations, connections, things, what ripple effects they have. For me, I never sit at a table to try to change someone's mind. I just speak my authentic truth. And I've lost, like I'm sure there are people who I don't talk to anymore as a result of that. But
Hmm.
so many people have come through Reams, either as an employee or as customers that didn't know anything about what a Palestinian was
Mm,
happening and now really know and call their representatives or like
mm,
not that they were against anything, it's just I think their minds and their worlds got expanded. I always hear anecdotes of that, like I didn't
right.
really know that much and now I
Right.
know a lot. And a feeling of guilt, which I hate. I'm like there's now I'm like
Yeah.
um,
Lack of information, and you're
yeah,
humanizing something that they
there's
don't know
much
anything about.
there's much more of that honestly than anything else that I've seen in my 10 years of having a business. And even having a cookbook, you know, some of the audience members of this cookbook you will just never guess in your million years. I got white burly men from Texas running up to me and they're fans. Maybe because I'm cute, but I'm pretty sure they're like,
You are cute.
like something spoke to me.
Yeah.
I saw a piece of myself in that book, and I
Right.
think that universal experience of being human,
Yeah.
you don't have to teach that to anyone. I think, again, once you bring the guards down,
You
um,
connect.
radical hospitality, you feel
Mm,
love for people. And then some people are just ingrained with whatever, and they just need their own processes. Doesn't matter what you would do, right? So
right.
like we're not in the business of trying to change someone's perspective in that way. But yeah.
Well, speaking of your cookbook, Arabiyya is part cookbook and part memoir. How did you decide what stories and recipes belonged in that book?
Well, first off, I didn't want to write a cookbook, but apparently I was not important enough to write a whole memoir. So I stuck the memoir in there. And luckily I had really amazing editors at 10 Speed Press who like loved it and was like, go for it. And I definitely submitted a bigger book. Like I essentially, they're like, we only needed 40,000 words and I gave them like 100,000 words. So I had a lot to say, so to speak, but we're going to save some of that for the next book. But yeah, it was a really tough process to figure out kind of where does the story start and end. There was so much left to be told at the end of Arabia. And I had to really make a decision. I always think non-linearly, like it wasn't, I was like, I want to stick the pastry parts in the middle of the book. They're like, no, sweets always goes at the end of a cookbook. I'm like, no, but that's where it is in my story. Like
Right.
I
Who said?
wanted the recipes to match the 5 vignettes that were like different parts.
Mm,
Each essay or kind of like vignette was an homage to somebody in my family that kind of explains why I am who I am and my food journey. And so, the first one is kind of the big Trojan horse, which is like how to host like an Arab, and then I like tell my grandmother's grueling story, but
mm.
basically make the point that if you want to know how I cook, you gotta understand how she cooked and how she approached.
You stand on the shoulders.
Yeah, and so everything had kind of a theme and a time in my life, and characters that shaped my life. And then we took, obviously bread was a big component of this cookbook, different than other cookbooks because I'm a bread baker first and foremost. I learned
Mm.
how professionally, literally while having my restaurant. I was part of an incubator program that helped me a little bit. Yeah, we really tried to kind of fit the recipes to the themes of the book. And it wasn't easy. We had to trim down a lot. There were a lot of recipes that didn't make it, but
Mhm.
I wanted, the most popular ones. There's like some things like the cookie recipe that I did not want to put in the cookbook, but everybody wanted the cookie recipe. Fun fact, we're known for this chocolate chip cookie in our bakery. That's like the top cookie in the Bay Area. It's like blind
Wow.
tested by the San Francisco Chronicle, and so it started to get like a cult following.
Well, that's
Um,
so cool.
and it's funny because people wanted it in the cookbook, but they're like, that's too complicated. They still come to the bakery to get it. If you read the cookbook, every story has it's not an afterthought. Like and I had my aunt help me write this book, and
Oh,
she's a
so
great
cool.
storyteller and really pushed me to, the head notes to really have a story behind it. Because
Mm.
you think like when you cook something, then you'll remember that story. And I often, when people post my recipes, they don't just post a recipe, they'll like say something funny about the anecdote. So, it's like they know me.
So through this experiences, I mean, cookbook, your community organizing, the just being a human in this world, what is the biggest misconception you hear about Arab food in the US? And I mean, I think you've answered this in different ways, but How do you challenge it?
Yeah. I mean, I guess this is still the trope that Arab street food is cheap food, you know. The true cost of food that's really, and this is all ethnic foods really, that in order in order to like have that cost justification, it has to be quote unquote elevated, right? But that Arab food is elevated in and of itself. It's one of the original cuisines all the way back before the Arabs, right? In that region, the Assyrians were one of the original like civilizations. I always joke that my grandmother could do like circles around some of these Michelin chefs.
I
You
love
know,
that.
we have advanced fermentation techniques, the preservation, the meat cookery, the curing, all of the things, right? So,
Right.
and we have been able to do that with so little, and that's like a testament to the skill level. So I think that my food is not cheap, and it's intentionally because there's a lot of skill that goes into making that dip from start to finish. Yeah, and that I think the misconception still in the States, unfortunately, is like all we are is like hummus and
Mm,
falafel, maybe shawarma, you know. And like there's just so much more. We're not a monolith. We come from different countries, cultures,
right.
experiences, class backgrounds, and that all
Absolutely.
that's the way that our food is made. And in fact, if you go back home from village to village, no one dish is alike. So there's no
Right.
such thing as an authentic
Right.
local recipe or
Absolutely.
whatever. There's just no such thing as the original one, right? Like food is kind of fluid, and that's the beauty of particularly that region where people before the colonizers came were flowing very freely and exchanging and getting good ideas from one another and adapting. That's what makes the best food, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm a vegetarian, and whenever I cook Persian food, there's no meat. And, no one's saying I'm not cooking the dish or like the stew because there's no meat in it. It's just my version of it. Or you use the ingredients you can find in the areas you live, and like the essence is still the essence. No, I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to do some quick fire fun questions before we close. And my first question is, if you could only eat one meze for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Kibbe.
Okay, for those who don't know who it is,
Yeah, it's like a stuffed bulgur croquette. I don't know. That's what first came to my head, so I'm gonna go with it.
well,
Stuffed meat croquettes, pumpkin croquettes, potato croquettes.
okay. Second question. What song or soundtrack is playing in your kitchen or in your head when you're cooking?
Bad Bunny, his yo. Right now, that's what's
That's what you're listening to right now. We
or
all now
repeat
know.
or Kendrick Lamar.
I love it. All right, so we're coming to the last question. If we were all gathered around your table, people from every chapter of your life, past and present, what's the one dish you'd serve to tell your story and why?
That's a hard question. I guess I'll go with the cover of my cookbook, the matlube. The matlube is just kind of really fun layered rice dish, and there's like the traditional versions, but I'm not traditional in any shape, so I would put I would layer it with whatever delicious vegetables are in season.
Mm,
I would do it with lamb, because I love lambs, low and slow roasted. And I would flip it over for everyone and have people go at it.
that sounds wonderful. Well, Reem, thank you for bringing us into your kitchen, your memories, and your heart today. Your stories remind us that food is never just what's on the plate. It's about the people, the history, and the love we carry with every bite. So, to everyone who's listening, may you find moments this week to share a meal, listen deeply, and taste the world in all of its beauty. Until next time, this is Nom Nom, where every dish has a story. And Reem, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would want to get out there and share?
We're about to open a bakery in Jack London Square district of Oakland. So if there are California watchers, we're trying to get the community to invest in that bakery. We put out a we funder for that. That's you would be a real investor, even as low as $100, and you would be get to be part of this new bakery where we're trying to get as many Arab bread into as many hands and homes as possible. So we're kind of building up our wholesale business.
It's exciting. And for those who are visiting,
Yeah, I was gonna say you can also find us in our San Francisco restaurant in the Mission District. We're online at Reams, California. You can see what we're up to there. And you can always, I'm, gallivanting all around the country, doing really interesting food collaborations. So you can find me online at reem.asil.
it's so exciting. Thank you so much. I really just, it's a lot really resonated differently and similarly. And I think in this time of the world, it's just so important to hear the stories and again, humanize the people who are being impacted. So thank you.